Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Je suis Christina Stahula, conseillère principale et directrice de ce projet d'analyse prospective au Conseil national de recherche du Canada. Merci beaucoup d'être avec nous aujourd'hui. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Christina Stahulak, and I'm joined this afternoon by Dr. Dan Wehner, Departmental Science Advisor and Chief Science Officer at the National Research Council, who is our project sponsor and executive champion for the Technology Horizon project. Before I begin, I wish to acknowledge that we have people joining us today from across the country on unceded, shared, and traditional territories of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We respectfully honor these people's rights, history, and relationships with this land. We are joining you from Ottawa, Ontario, on the traditional land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. I welcome now Dr. Wehner to open our session and to say a few introductory words about this project.
Okay, thank you, Christina. I wanted to welcome everyone who's joining this session, and wanted today to present what we've been doing in technology horizon scanning. So the idea of scanning is really trying to get a sense of what is really coming at us. There are many approaches to do this. There is traditional foresight, which is very much scenario-based and tends to look very far out and is critical for supporting the development of public policy. And you go all the way down to the nearest term, which could be things like road mapping, where once you can validate most of the assumptions related to developing particular products or services, you can then roadmap that out into the future. From the NRC perspective, there is a time scale that we're particularly interested in, which is really trying to look out 10 to 15 years. We can go on to the next slide, maybe. So kind of challenges and opportunities that we're thinking about is ultimately for an R&D organization to be able to look out and get a sense of what is really on the 10 to 15 year horizon, which is most critical for long-term strategic planning. Getting a sense of which technologies are going to be potential solutions to key challenges, both societal, economic, as well as environmental, requires having a sense first of what are the challenges we must first address, followed by what are the kinds of technologies that we see out there that are potential solutions. And the nature of this, by the way, is this is not about predicting what science we need. In general, once you identified a particular technology solution, there is already a good part of the science that has already been done, and we're looking at what needs to be advanced. But the most critical perspective that comes to an organization like NRC in terms of our planning is recognizing that our capabilities develop and are really created over this period of anywhere from 5 to 15 years, depending on what you're doing. So once you identify technologies, the challenge is, what are the kinds of capabilities that we need as a nation, and what subset of those technologies should NRC invest in the public interest? It's a challenge. I think Niels Bohr said prediction is difficult, especially about the future. And so, but the horizon scanning technique gives us that, I think, the nice sweet spot between trying to look far enough out in the future with a higher degree of certainty for planning purposes. And so with that, maybe what I'll do is turn that back over to Christina, and she can walk us through what we've been doing.
Thank you, Dan. So yeah, I'd like to first speak about the methodology behind our work and share some of the perspectives that we've gathered over the past year and a half. So over the summer of 2020, we assembled a small team at NRC to experiment with some horizon scanning methodologies, together with our external consultant, Claire Walker, and the external chair of the process, Dr. Peter Nicholson. We were inspired by an approach pioneered by Professor Bill Sutherland at Cambridge University, who's been running horizon scanning exercises since 2010, mainly in the field of conservation biology, but in other areas as well, in response to frequently requests for policy directions from the UK and other governments. So there were two phases to our work. The first culminated in a report on the opportunities and challenges that Canada will face in the coming decade. And in phase 2, we developed an approach to identify some of the capabilities needed to respond. So in phase 1, we convened a group of 40 expert thought leaders from across Canada in 6 broad areas, paying particular attention to geographical and gender diversity. So the 6 broad areas were climate change, resource futures, big data and AI, cybersecurity and privacy, healthcare futures, and new models of innovation. And 2 of these here are singled out as areas for phase 2 deeper dive. So we invited the members of each subgroup to draft short statements about the challenges and opportunities on the horizon in Canada over the next 10-15 years. Each subgroup did a scoring exercise of the statements presented. And then we had individual subgroup video conferences to review and combine the statements within each subgroup. Our internal secretariat compiled all of the statements and supported the drafting of a report. Had a plenary session to review the final report, which is now on the NRC website. And I've posted the English and French links to the report in our chat in the discussion forum of this meeting. So the report, when you read it, it paints a portrait of a society in 2035 in which technology is really developed in the service of human goals, with some key recurring themes that cut across all subgroup discussions, including the continued competitiveness of Canada's economy, data, with a view to regard it as a strategic national resource necessary to build Canada's competitiveness, sustainability and resilience, which was particularly prominent in the climate change and resource futures chapters, but also resilience in terms of our IT-based mission critical systems that will require world-class data infrastructure. The importance of community engagement and which societal goals would a particular technology actually serve, and what factors could enhance public trust and acceptance. And finally, application of the equity, diversity, and inclusion lens to the technology solutions of the future, not only as a source of innovation, but also as a way to strengthen societal resilience. I'd really invite you to have a look at the report. And as I mentioned, the links are in the chat, can also be found on our NRC website. It's really a mosaic of the perspectives of Canadian thought leaders about the future, and the original ideas submitted by the working group members are featured under overarching statements that I'll show briefly in the next couple of slides. Here in the subgroups on climate change and resource futures, which is the first 2 chapters, participants submitted statements on carbon neutral energy production, decarbonizing the production and use of oil and gas, electrification of transportation, and innovative technologies to augment our natural advantages in agri-food, forestry, and mineral resources. And coupled with the technology future considerations, working members in both groups submitted statements on social trust and the importance of aligning and co-developing with affected communities in order to come to a shared understanding of the far-reaching changes that are needed in these areas. So the discussions, while largely technological, were also about the non-technical barriers to adoption and dissemination into society. And we found this in the other subgroups as well. The subgroups on big data and AI and cybersecurity also raised the issue of trust, particularly in the context of data privacy and the need for transparent safeguards of security and privacy. And some of the ideas submitted in the context of maintaining Canada's competitive edge included sustained support for fundamental AI research and niche applications with a flavor of technology futures ranging from natural language processing to brain-computer interfaces and haptic simulation, as well as some innovative healthcare services that AI and data make possible, like wearable sensors and AI and robot carers. In the cybersecurity and privacy group, there was a discussion about privacy laws, data breaches, and a focus on technologies to harden expanding digital infrastructure. by making resilience the top priority, and discussions about Canada becoming a leading global location and transfer point for international data flows. So really, I'd invite you to have a look at the full report, and these final two chapters, very interesting also on the new models of innovation, particularly those that promote and enable the creativity and of individuals and communities, and how data is the new material driving innovation. And finally, the chapter on health, which is something that is so important to us all, especially these days, really speaks to health technology futures and how they can increase healthcare equity, accessibility, and efficiency in Canada. And again, looking at new models of wellness, an integrated healthcare system, and participation, in particular, of Indigenous peoples in the development and implementation of innovations in health and healthcare. So that's the report. Back to the process. We released the report this past July, and over the summer we attempted to do a bit of a deeper dive into some of the technology solutions with the broader community to understand, are we prepared for these, and if not, where do our science, technology, innovation capabilities need to be strengthened? We held a series of workshops during the month of July with expert working groups from across the country and internationally, each chaired by Dr. Nicholson. We asked the experts to propose technology solutions, which were then ranked according to readiness to implement the solutions and then discussed in the Zoom workshops. We then posted the solutions online for feedback and also requested new proposals. And unfortunately, our online engagement was cut short by the election, but the preliminary results are very interesting and provocative, but would require deeper analysis to draw some definitive conclusions. This is an example of the outcomes from one of our workshops on non-emitting energy sources. So we asked participants to assess the relative importance of the technology solutions and the capabilities for each, including business commitment, talent, R&D intensity, facilities and equipment, government programs, and policy and regulatory environment. This really represents the perspectives of a small but highly informed group of thought leaders, and while it still needs further validation, it does present us with some really interesting things to think about. For example, we know that there's a global move towards electrification of transportation. What does it mean for the challenge that puts on our power grids? So this gives us an idea of where our capabilities need to be strengthened. And ideally, we'd like to drill deeper into horizon scans of each of these areas. They can help us to sort of better understand how to prepare for the future. So our approach, as I mentioned, is still quite experimental. We've learned quite a few lessons along the way, but would be happy to respond to any questions that you might have about the project or the process. I think I'll stop sharing my screen at this point. And I will see if we have any questions. I'm not yet seeing any questions in the Q&A. But maybe Dan, do you see any questions? I may be looking.
Don't see questions, but let me. So ultimately, to me anyway, what's really critical is looking at the intersection of science and technology, social license, and public policy. And ultimately, for an organization like NRC, the most important long-term decisions we make is really what we need to be good at, and that needs to be in the context of what is critical. What are the critical capabilities for a country? Where do they currently exist? Where are they strong? Where are their gaps? And in those gaps are those opportunities for us to build something either within NRC or collectively with partners. So that's really been the driving force from my perspective in trying to get these perspectives.
I do see a question here in the forum. Thank you. Thank you. As you're focusing on the future, to what extent did you involve youth in this process? Very good question. Thank you very much. And that was indeed a big preoccupation for us when we were defining the compositional guidelines. It is very difficult to ask people how old they are, but we were very careful to target some of the youth organizations, and specifically in our conversations when we were reaching out to associations, it was one of the requests that we made, which was to ensure that we had youth represented on the core group, on the working group, and also in our panels. How to mitigate? Yes, sorry.
So let me just add a bit to that. So I think in the end, if you were to ask me, would I be this broad again, my answer would be no. It turned out to be maybe more than we could chew on. So just to be completely honest, the things that were left out, just to answer the first question that Brad Wallace asked, we did not include advanced manufacturing, and we could have, and that's something that might be worth circling back to. We did not include non-medical biotechnology, which is also an important area. So we learned a lot in the process. I think if we were to go forward, we would be choosing more narrow things that would allow us to drill a little bit deeper than we actually could in such a broad study. Something from Jeff Kinder. What are the governance aspects of addressing these challenge areas? Do we have the right policy toolkit, or do we need tools? It sounds like that's the kind of question I should be asking you, Jeff. We did look at very broadly at governance, but the process itself to me was really designed to give us a technology insight and not so much of the governance insight that you're asking about. And so I'm going to, I won't comment directly on whether we have the right policy toolkit, because that's the kind of thing I would just ask you, to be honest.
There's a great question here from Marc Fortin: how to mitigate the risk that the analysis is too retrospective, that it builds on what we are good at versus where we might build in the future. It's a very good question, Marc, and I think part of the statements, many of the statements that we received were also very aspirational and really with that forward-thinking approach. But it's definitely something that we were conscious of, and part of what we asked participants to do was to really position themselves in the future and to write the statements as though they were in the future and describing the current environment. But it's definitely one of those things I think that we need to be aware of in any of these forward-looking exercises. I don't know, Dan, if you wanted to add to that.
No, I think that's fine. There's another question about whether or not we have involved youth, since we're looking into the future. I was wondering, that to me is an interesting question, and I'd answer it in this way. The intent really is to really broadly crowdsource the solution. So again, we're looking at the technologies, but the technologies have to be looked at in the context of what I was saying earlier. I'm going to say the social license and the current public policy landscape. So ideally, our crowdsourcing tools should have been able to reach out and engage youth, but I don't think that they were up long enough for us to really get a sense of how effectively the crowdsourcing approach worked. That's how I would approach this in the future, though. And Christine, I don't know. I don't think that we particularly brought youth into our expert group. although we did have some millennials involved.
Yes, we did actually. And in some of the conversations with the people that we reached out to, particularly in the first phase, it was one of the requests that we made in our communications, was to include youth. We did approach the universities and colleges as well, and we had some great participation and insights from OCAD, and just having the really the perspective, particularly in the final chapters in the new models of innovation. There's reference to youth as well, and the importance of having the youth perspective.
There's a question.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking to the question of how often we're planning to refresh, and so as this actually is an experiment, and the extent to which it can or should be refreshed, in my opinion, is going to be whether or not it actually is making a difference. So so that would be my first response, and that is it's a time commitment, it's a lot of effort, and if it's not actually supporting decision making, then it feels sort of academic and theoretical. And so I would like to come back in a year from now and tell you the extent to which this process has really influenced decision making in our organization or elsewhere, and then I would be in a better position to tell you how committed I am to making this something that we do on a regular basis. My gut tells me that we should, but I don't think we know enough yet to be definitive. There's another question in the live Q&A. Couple questions. So I have one, which is, have you set up checkpoints over the lifetime of this horizon scan? For example, after 5 years, will you perform some kind of analysis to ensure predictions are coming true? So, and it's an interesting question for me. I'll just say that I see the insight coming out of this at the level of capabilities. And so, you know, and I'll give you an example, and that is that storage technologies are going to have a broad impact, not just in the electrification of vehicles or in an updated smart grid, but in a wide range of other applications. And so to me, the value is in really looking at the spectrum of technology solutions, all of which have a high degree of uncertainty at this stage, looking out 15 years, and translating that back into, is there a common set of capabilities that actually gives us the opportunity to pivot in one direction or another? And the ability to pivot, maybe the best near-term example was the ability of organizations, including NRC across the country, to pivot from what they were doing in various types of health research and then focus their attention on how we can actually address the pandemic in Canada. And then once that is under control, I presume that many will then pivot back to their original lines of research. But you can only pivot when you actually have the set of capabilities that have broad utility, and that's ultimately, from an R&D organization perspective, the insight that I think is most important.
I do see here that we have some of our working group members who are actually participants and attendees today, and wonderful to have you, and just a great opportunity to work with external experts on this project. Having the insights of the working group members who are experts in their fields is really key to, I think, the success of this whole project, and really gives an insight, as Dan said at the very beginning of the presentation. it's not so much about predicting the future. It's not that far away. It's what do the experts really know now, and what do they see in their realm of expertise? And that's, I think, just looking back at the process, that was just tremendous and very important contribution to the whole process.
I see another comment, another question in the live Q&A. Elaborate on what sustained heavy investment by government means. NRC, our job is to support the implementation of policy and not to actually even develop it. And I would say that it's not really for me or for the NRC to say what sustained heavy investments mean. I think that we can start to help to develop a consensus of what that means by defining more clearly key objectives that must be met to address the challenges that we're focused on the horizon. So the speech from the throne was on today. I actually didn't get a chance to see it, and I'd be very interested in going back and seeing the extent to which there is a reference to commitments on dealing with the large global and national challenges that we face. I see one from, can you explain more on how you determine Canadians' strengths and weaknesses? That's a process question. Let me defer to Christina to answer that.
So it was a process where we asked the participants to submit their statements, and well, in phase 1, their statements, in phase 2, their proposed technology solutions. And we then collated all of the submissions and sent them back out to the subgroups or the small working groups. And we actually asked the participants in the working groups to rank the statements according to relative importance, technology readiness, depending on the phase of the process. And we used a tool, a survey tool, to do this, and we were able to then use the results from those surveys of about 10 to 12 people, depending on the size of the group. And we would then present those at the beginning of the workshop. Our chair, Dr. Nicholson, would take the workshop participants through the preliminary results, and that was essentially how we ordered the discussion. It was really to help guide our discussion. You'll see in the phase 1 report that there is no actual ranking, and we did not present it in that way. It was mainly used as a way to help us structure the conversation and answer address the main issues and the themes that were coming out of the statements that we were receiving.
We're getting close to the end. I would like to actually, before we wrap up, reiterate that what we're seeing in the initial report was ultimately the perspectives of 40 thought leaders. And so it really is a set of perspectives and should not be seen as a comprehensive and definitive view, but it is intended to stimulate discussion and with the broader crowdsourcing approaches, extending the reach and the engagement, and there's an opportunity for us to build a much stronger consensus on the key challenges and how we should go at them. And we're coming up to the end, so let me thank everyone. It was very engaging, if not two-dimensional. It's an opportunity to sort of chat with you. It'd be nice to be able to see your faces and hear your voices, but this has been very helpful for us, and I hope that you found it useful.
Thanks so much, Dan. Thanks everyone for participating, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.